Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. It's time once again for another segment of curating your movie library, and I am once again joined with my partner in movie watching, my best friend, my wife, Lisa. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being willing to try out this show series, mini-series. It's longer than a movie, but not quite a series that we watch together called Alias Grace. It's a drama. It's got a connection to a historical reality, but you may not know this, dear, that it was actually written by Margaret Atwood. Does that name ring a bell with you at all? Margaret Atwood is best known as the author of The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh.
Which is...
I think we watched
We
some
started
of that.
one of them, yes. But it is, sweetheart, probably the most virulently opposed to our worldview movie that's ever been made.
That's probably why I haven't yet.
Yeah. This is a movie where all the bad guys are conservative and all the good guys are feminists, and it's just and that's what Margaret Atwood is all about. So I was not, I was on my guard and thinking, oh man, I don't know if I can enjoy a Margaret Atwood series, but we did. I did, and knowing it was from Margaret Atwood, and
and it was based on a true story.
Yes, and by the way, you don't become a very successful liberal novelist if you're a very bad liberal writer. You're generally got to be a pretty good liberal writer. So I'm not that surprised that it was pretty engaging and entertaining. I can tell you, for me, that it was. It's the story based on the story of a woman who was convicted along with another servant, James McDermott, of killing the boss,
the two,
and his,
the Kinnear household.
Yeah, the Kinnear household, and the man was convicted and hung. Grace was convicted, sent to a mental hospital for a while, and then finished her life in prison. Although that's not how it ends in the movie.
Well, we don't really know what life is. Is it until she dies, or is it life sentence so many years? Because I think when she got out, it was...
exactly
and
right.
I don't
Good point. I
think
forgot about that.
I'm
thinking life.
Researched that, right?
Okay.
Because when she did get out, she had aged quite a bit.
Yes, it's like 30 years afterwards. But most of the movie switches back and forth between the events that led to the charge and her conversations with this psychiatrist.
This doctor.
Now, the psychiatrist was played, I don't remember the actor's name, but he was the same guy who was in the English game that we really enjoyed. We've already talked about. So he's the psychiatrist and this girl, and I just loved the two of them together. I particularly liked the way she spoke. That sir, almost every other word. Very self-controlled, and interestingly, that's kind of where Margaret Atwood fits in here, because I think what's going on here is we're engaged in this story, and we're trying to wrestle with the very same issues that they wrestled with at the time, right? How responsible is she?
Trying to always ask the right question to see if you can find out if she's mentally insane or if she's guilty of a crime.
Right, and even...
Or both.
Or even if, insofar as she may be guilty, how does it relate to the power that McDermott had over her, and how much of it is her own? And then you got to wonder about, is she manipulating all along?
The story is built in such a way that you really get engaged to her, that you think she just seemed so sensible. Here she was, an older child abused by her father, who was covering her young children, was sent to go work, and then was talked into not sending the money back for fear that the father would spend it all on alcohol and it wouldn't go for the children. And she was losing the people that she was loving. Yes. And so, there's a trauma that goes with that.
And then there's the relationship with her best friend, and then the weirdness of, at least in the movie, is there a multiple personality thing going on here? So there's a lot of mystery to it where you don't really know what's going on, and even at the end you don't, which I think again was intentional, because part of what Atwood is saying, I think, is this. If you remember, she said something to the doctor where she said, "How else could I get a doctor to listen to me?" Something like that. She's telling the story. And the point is, why are we watching this story? This woman's life was so insignificant that without the drama, we never would have known her name, never would have thought of her. With the drama, we're drawn in and we're investing 4.5 hours in watching the story. And the whole point is really to make me feel guilty and you feel guilty for being interested.
Right.
And turning her tragedy into our entertainment.
Right.
Which is pretty clever and worked. But the reason it worked is because it was entertaining. I mean, you do want to know. You do want to figure it out. Let me say this as we're running out of time. Again, this is not a movie that I'm embarrassed to have seen. There's not anything terribly racy.
No, there's not anything really racy. I do think that toward the end, where you are seeing her being hypnotized,
yes,
and you see a spirit come out that talks through her, and her eyes open, she's veiled, it has a different voice, and it's saying to the audience as it's asking her questions, she doesn't know. I tried to tell her to open a window so I could escape. So there is kind of this eerie part that you don't see, although it's like, the split personality that she's whole, she would never have done something like this, to she's basically trapped by this second personality or this spiritual aspect that has caused her to murder someone. And while she's quilting, and
plus the potentiality of the con, because the hypnotist
was her old friend, who was kind of a con guy.
And he was a peddler, and he wasn't really a doctor. He wasn't really trained, and so then you wonder, was this all plotted out and planned out? And
if you remember, before this murder took place, he wanted her to go with him.
Yes, exactly.
He wanted her to escape the job she had before she was taken into Montgomery's home.
Right.
And when he started doing this hypnosis and she began to talk, the look on his face, the other voice that was talking, was like, what?
Almost like Saul and the Witch of Endor.
And it can also show you, too, really how medicine was advanced. I mean, there were so many different fields that were not necessarily considered mainline medicinal ways to heal someone, where they were trying to find ways to figure out mental illness. And I really was sad the way it ended.
I was sad the way it ended too. But let's conclude and end this as we're running out of time, and just point out that this is not the greatest thing we've ever seen. It's not something we can say everybody's got to see, but it was worth watching. We enjoyed it.
It was.
All right. Thank you, sweetheart, for being with me.
You're welcome.
Look forward to next time. Earlier today, I had a very good and helpful conversation with my precious wife, Lisa. And she and I were talking about our Life in the Blender segments, and she was talking about the value and the importance of openness and honesty. And we recorded one, I think, that was probably more open and honest than anyone that we've had before. It doesn't mean we're dishonest or closed, but it got me thinking. And one of the things that she said is, this is not, speaking of the podcast in general, it's not just entertainment. I hope you understand that. I mean, I understand, certainly, that if I come across as boring, if I'm making you yawn, then you're not going to tune in. And that's okay. But I'm not principally concerned with being entertaining. The function of the entertainment is to hold on to your attention so that we can be a help, so that we can help you specifically to grow in grace and wisdom. Now, some segments, that's easier to see than others. Also today, I recorded a segment on the top 5 fast food hamburgers you can get. And I grant you that it's kind of a long walk to get from that to spiritual formation. I'm also starting a new series that we call Love Is, in which we'll be looking at the qualities of love outlined by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And that one, again, it's much easier and clearer to see. But these are just different ends of a spectrum. And the goal remains the same, whatever end of the spectrum we're on. We're wanting to talk about how to live in grace in ordinary life, while also talking about how ordinary life gives us opportunity to live in light of grace. That's just another way of saying Jesus changes everything. Now, this is not a polemical podcast. This is not the place you should come to get equipped for talking points and arguments by which you might pummel your intellectual opponents about the head. That's not what we're here for. It's not what I'm interested in doing. I know how to do it, but I'm not interested in doing it. It's not what we're here for. What we're here for, again, is to help one another grow in grace, to help one another better reflect the character of Jesus. Not only does Jesus change everything, but everyone that Jesus is changing, he's changing into an increasing likeness of himself. And that's what I want to be a part of. That's why I choose the things to talk about that I choose to talk about. It's how I hope this podcast stands apart from other podcasts. And for one thing, and I've said this all along about preaching, the only way that you can preach in a way that's going to help and bless and grow the sheep under your care is if you will preach a message that will cause you to grow and increase in grace. You've got to preach to your own sins, your own weaknesses, your own failures if you want to hit those things in the lives of your parishioners. And the same thing is true in the context of this podcast. The only way to help you is for me to talk about my own journey, which means I trust that there's a level of openness and honesty, not just in our Life in the Blender segments, but in everything that we do. I want to be willing to risk openness, to risk acknowledging the reality of all of my warts and my feet of clay so that I can be a help. I mean, friends, so much of the evangelical church is exactly backwards on this, where people in positions of church leadership think it's their job to present an image of success, even spiritual success. And I've been a part of that wrong approach. I want to be willing and ready to say, Jesus saves sinners just like me. I want to be willing to acknowledge my dependence upon his grace. That's how I want this segment to be, this podcast to be different. This is not Jesus changes your thoughts. This is not what the Bible has to say about this and that. This is Jesus changes everything, which means us from the inside out. If that's something you can get behind, I'm hoping you'll consider supporting this work. I can't present an image of success. I can't sell you on, listen to me, be like me, and you'll have everything that you need in your spiritual life. It's not going to help you, it's not going to help me, and it's not worth doing. But if I can sit here and talk to you about Jesus and how he does change everything and how he is changing things in my life, then maybe I can be a help to you. Will you consider being a help to us and supporting the work of Dunamis Fellowship and this podcast? As always, it's as easy could be. Simply go to rcsprouljr.com, and right there on the homepage there's a donate button. Click the button, follow the directions. Thanks for listening. There have been many blessings that have come my way with being deplatformed. One of those blessings is that I've been freed from various and sundry internet press gangs. There was a time that whenever there was a hubbub of any kind on the internet, that agitators on both sides would typically seek to win my allegiance, to commit my sword to their cause. I get that. Everyone wants allies. And how nice if you can say, I have an ally in the son of R.C. Sproul. And for those who are willing to take sides, we recognize that no one wants to be known for having their backside overrun with splinters from inveterate fence sitting. There are times when the call to battle requires that we take up arms. Then there are times to ignore rabble-rousers. The internet creates some perverse incentives toward war. Success on the web is measured by likes, page views, retweets. One sure way to acquire these precious commodities is to go after someone with a bigger reach and lay siege. Lest you reveal your pettiness, it's always wise to dress up your attack as a valiant, thankless effort to protect the less discerning sheep from the big, bad wolf. But friends, this is what the devil's advocates, this is what accusers of the brethren have always done. There is a black thread that runs through those who hate those whom Christ's work has saved. From Satan's accusations against Joshua the high priest, to the crowd's accusations against Stephen, to the Pope's accusations against Luther, to the diabolical work of the Dominicans during the Inquisition, to discernment ministries in our day, the animus is all the same. The accusations of the devil will always stick if we look at the accused alone. Should people be warned about Rosaria Butterfield? Of course. Should they be tipped off about Tom Askell? By all means. Has Marcus Pittman brought harm to the body of Christ? You bet. Is J.D. Hall a danger? We had all better beware. Is R. Scott Clark infected with error? No question. Is Al Mohler off base on important issues? Who could doubt it? Does C.J. Mahaney have skeletons in his closet? Probably an army of them. Does John MacArthur struggle with pride? I'm sure he does. But friends, all of these warnings apply to me as well, and to you, which is why Jesus came. Those discerners who hate me see right through me. My Heavenly Father, who loves me, sees me through Jesus. Our Corinthian fathers rightly received Paul's rebuke for their partisan ways. They, though, at least had the courtesy to be identified by whom they were for. I am of Paul. I am of Cephas. We so often are so much worse, identifying ourselves by whom we are against. And we think ourselves faithful servants of our King as we figuratively murder the ones he literally died for. So what do? Well, we recognize ourselves in the mirror. And with the aid of God's Spirit, we go to war against our own sins, our old man, our flesh. We repent for our tribal ways and ask for the grace to show the grace to others that we depend on ourselves. If we feel the need to warn the brethren, then let's warn them about ourselves.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.